The hangar doors groaned open at dawn, and 40 pairs of eyes turned toward the man in the faded gray jumpsuit, standing alone on the tarmac. He was not supposed to be there. Everyone knew it. The billion-dollar helicopter gleaming behind him belonged to a world of tailored suits and polished shoes, not to a ground crew mechanic who smelled of engine oil and had calluses thicker than the manuals he studied every night. But today, fate had a different plan, and it was about to humiliate the one person who thought power was the only language worth speaking. If stories about second chances and quiet strength move you, this is exactly the kind of story we tell here. Hit that like button. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs a little hope today. And subscribe to Kindness Corner if you believe people deserve more than the box the world puts them in. Now, let's get into it. His name was Malik, and for 6 years he had kept Executive Air's fleet running without a single delay, without a single complaint, without a single person bothering to learn his full name. To the pilots, he was the mechanic. To the flight attendants, he was a nod in the hallway. To Diane Whitfield, the steel-eyed CEO who had built her father's failing charter company into a billion-dollar empire, he was invisible until the morning her scheduled pilot called in sick. 2 hours before she was due to fly to a career-defining meeting in Washington, Diane stood on the tarmac in her red blazer, arms crossed, fury simmering beneath her composed exterior. Every backup pilot was grounded, in transit, or unreachable. Her assistant frantically scrolled through contact lists, while security agents shifted uncomfortably in the morning heat. That was when Malik, wiping grease from his hands, quietly mentioned that he was certified. Not just certified, he held an active commercial helicopter license, current medical clearance, and hundreds of logged flight hours. The words landed in the group like a dropped wrench. Diane turned slowly, studying him as though he had just claimed to be an astronaut. Her laugh was short, sharp, disbelieving. "You," she said, gesturing at his stained coveralls, "want me to believe you can fly this aircraft?" When he nodded, calm and unshaken, she crossed her arms tighter and delivered the words that would ripple through the company for weeks after. "Fine. Fly this jet, then we'll talk." It wasn't an invitation. It was a dare wrapped in mockery. The kind of sentence meant to embarrass a man back into his place. What Diane didn't know, what nobody in that hangar knew, was that Malik had once commanded search and rescue helicopters through mountain storms that grounded lesser pilots, plucking stranded hikers from cliffs no one else dared approach. He had flown medevac missions through blackout conditions, guided wounded soldiers to safety when radios failed and instruments flickered, and once landed a damaged aircraft on a strip barely wider than his rotor blades. But after leaving the service, broken by a diagnosis that grounded him from military flight status for 2 years, and after a company merger buried his resume beneath algorithms that only recognized recent civilian aviation experience, Malik found himself starting over. He took the mechanic job not out of desperation but out of quiet dignity. A paycheck, a roof, a way to stay near the aircraft he still loved, waiting patiently for medical clearance to return to the sky. He never advertised his past. He never needed anyone's permission to know his own worth. But pride, real pride, doesn't announce itself. It waits. As he climbed into the cockpit that morning, the security team exchanged nervous glances, murmuring that this was reckless, that someone should stop this before it became a headline. Diane, however, folded her arms and settled into her seat with the icy satisfaction of someone certain she was about to witness a public failure that would finally put the mechanic back where she believed he belonged. She wanted him to fail. Some small, ugly part of her needed the hierarchy of her world confirmed. The engines roared to life, and something shifted in Malik's posture. The instant his hands touched the controls, transformation flooding through a body that remembered exactly what it was built to do. The rotors spun faster. The aircraft trembled with contained power, and then, smooth as breath, they lifted off the tarmac. There was no jolt, no hesitation, no rookie shockiness. The helicopter rose with the elegant precision of a hand placing a crown gently onto a table. Diane's fingers, which had gripped the armrest bracing for disaster, slowly loosened. Through the windshield, clouds parted like curtains, and the city below unfolded in miniature perfection. 20 minutes into the flight, dark clouds rolled in without warning, and turbulence began rattling the cabin. The instruments flickered as a sudden electrical fault sparked through the console. The exact kind of failure that ends careers and headlines both. Panic swept through the cabin. Diane gripped her seat, and even the seasoned security agents behind her paled. But Malik's hands moved with a calm precision, flipping switches, adjusting the collective, steadying the aircraft through violent wind shear, as though he had done this 1,000 times before, because he had. Memories surfaced unbidden. The storm over the ridge that took his co-pilot's life years ago. The moment he swore he would never lose control of an aircraft again. No matter what raged outside the windows, he guided the helicopter through the turbulence with the same steady breath, the same unshaken resolve, landing it on the designated pad in Washington so gently that not a single cup of coffee spilled in the cabin. For a long moment no one spoke. Diane sat frozen, staring at the man who moments earlier she had mocked in front of his colleagues. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she asked the question that had been building since liftoff. Who are you, really? And for the first time Malik answered. Not with anger, not with the bitterness he had every right to carry, but with quiet honesty about the mountains he had flown through. The lives he had saved, the diagnosis that had cost him his wings, and the humility that had kept him grounded in more ways than one. He told her that dignity isn't a title on a badge. It's the choice to show up fully, even when no one is watching, even when the world only sees a jumpsuit and forgets to look at the hands inside it. Diane sat in silence for a long time after that, something in her expression cracking open. 2 weeks later, she stood before the entire company and announced the launch of a new command pilot position, created specifically for Malik, alongside a public apology that stunned the room into a hush before it dissolved into applause. But the real victory wasn't the promotion or the title. It was watching Malik walk into that hangar the next morning, not as the mechanic, but as a man finally seen for who he had always been. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that worth is never determined by what someone wears or where they stand, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that their past struggles don't define their future, and leave a comment telling us the moment you decided to believe in yourself again. And before we close this chapter, we have one special request. Comment the word wings below if you believe everyone deserves a chance to show who they really are. Thank you for being here, for choosing kindness, and for believing, like Malik did, that some things in life are worth waiting patiently to prove.